Well, a pleasant good morning to our members, to our colleagues, to the partners of the Small Business Association. A good afternoon to those who are joining us from Nigeria. It is now 2 minutes after 11 in Barbados, and I believe it is 2 minutes after 4 p.m. in Nigeria. So welcome one and all to this month's webinar. I am Dr. Lynette Holder, the moderator for this session. And as many of you who join us on a monthly basis may be aware, our sessions are recorded and will be available to one and all to review at your leisure and pleasure on both the SBA's website and on our YouTube channel. As we speak now, the session is also being live streamed on our Facebook page. So you can, as the saying goes, tell a friend, and invite them to join us for the next hour as we explore a rather interesting topic, but I'm sure one that all of us on the call are very keen to know a bit more about, and that is the Afreximbank as a source for small business financing in the Caribbean. Now, many of you would have recalled some time ago that this newest bank uh, uh, actually is the newest entrant into the banking sector here in Barbados. And a lot of work has been done since the Afreximbank entered our space, and therefore we felt it was only fitting that we invite our colleagues from the bank to come and share a little bit with us in our information sessions on what are the plans, what is it that they have in store for the small and medium enterprise sector here in the region relative to financing. Now, you will all agree that for some time, the Small Business Association has been advocating, has been lobbying for improvement in the access to financing for the sector. And not only debt financing, but our view has been that we need to ensure there's a wide selection, a wide range of financing options for the sector. So we need, yes, to have grants if we can, invite our partners to consider grant financing, if there's such a thing. But the provision of grants, and that has been done a lot by the Caribbean Export Development Agency. But we also believe that, there's a need for us to look at equity financing and other venture capital type funds. We also must look at development financing. Since the closure of the Barbados Development Bank back in the early 1990s. Much has been said now about the need for development financing. And then our traditional debt financing and a myriad of others. So we want to make sure that we are, kept abreast of what's happening and bring that information to you, our members. So we are here today, and for the next hour, we're going to have a conversation on this topic. I'm going to invite our speaker very shortly to share the screen and begin the conversation via the use of a PowerPoint presentation. But let me remind you before we get to that there will be an opportunity for questions, an opportunity for commentary at the end of the presentation. So I'm going to ask you to save your questions, save your comments, and at the end of the PowerPoint presentation, we'll be able to have that conversation. Also, please note that we use the chat feature on the Zoom platform. So we're going to use our chat feature on the Zoom platform for those questions. So if you have questions, as we're getting close to the end of the presentation, you can proceed to post your questions there. We will, go to the chat feature and make sure that we can engage you for the few moments that we are on the call. At the end of the exercise, we'll put in the chat segment a short questionnaire linked to a survey that we'll ask you to complete, just about 5 to 7 minutes of your time, just to let us know your feedback and any recommendations that you may have for us. This is a part colleagues, of our monthly webinar series. As you know, each month we are on this platform with a topic of interest, a topic that we believe will help our members to do better business. And so we are very pleased that you're able to spend a part of your Tuesday with us. So without any further ado, then let's get to our presentation for this morning. I'm very pleased, colleagues, that we have Ody Akhanoba, who is the head of the Afreximbank SME Development Unit. In his role, he's responsible for the delivery of the bank's SME development programs, which seeks to proliferate both financial and non-financial interventions to SMEs, not only on the African continent, but also now in the Caribbean, since the Afreximbank has a presence now in the region. Before joining the SME team, he led the development of various strategic initiatives, including SMEs, creatives, sports, and diaspora programs as an officer in the Strategy and Innovation Department. And prior to joining Afreximbank in January 2017, Ody held several various corporate finance and corporate strategy roles in investment banking over a 12-year period. He was most recently a vice president within the Deutsche Bank Strategy Group in London. Ody has a master's of business administration from London School of Business and a BA in finance from the Durham University in the United Kingdom. So he comes quite qualified to be able to help us distill this topic today. So without further ado, members of the SBA, friends and colleagues all, let me invite our presenter to share with us on the Afreximbank as a source for small business financing in the Caribbean. Ody, over to you.
Wow, thank you very much, Dr. Holder. I'm feeling the pressure. After that intro, you know, I feel like I feel a huge weight of responsibility on my shoulders. But you know, let's progress the discussion. Hopefully, it'll be worthwhile for those who've taken the time to join us this morning or afternoon, depending on where you are. But first and foremost, thank you, Dr. Holder and the SBA for the opportunity for us to actually present Afreximbank and the work that we're doing in terms of SME development. So I'm going to share my screen. Please let me know when you have sight of my slides, and then I'll kick off.
Sure, you can proceed to share your screen. Lovely.
Are you able to see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Excellent. All right. I'll get straight into it. So, I think, you know, one thing that cannot be disputed is that SMEs are in fact the heartland of our economies, both in Africa and in the Caribbean, right? You know, the empirical evidence is conclusive. SMEs generate a huge number of jobs in both African and Caribbean economies, anywhere between 70 and 90%, depending on country. SME's contribution to GDP is also, in most cases, more than 50%. So, you know, nobody can argue that SMEs are critical to the success of any economy in Africa or the Caribbean. But, you know, it remains the case that SMEs remain underserved in these parts of the world. You know, anywhere between 50 and 70% of SMEs in Africa or the Caribbean cannot access financing or the right kind of financing. And of course, you know, we are a big part of the reason why 5 out of 7 SMEs globally fail every year within the first year of their operations. So, what we've tried to do as Afreximbank is, sort of understand what is driving this obvious paradox. Why is it that we all know and understand that SMEs are so important, but yet, we cannot get them, to optimize. We cannot give them the support they need to meet their full potential. So, we realize, having, sort of obviously done the research and also engaged SMEs such as the members of the SBA, not the members of the SBA, but SMEs who are like the SMEs who are members of the SBA. We've worked out a number of barriers, a number of impediments, right? The first one is quite obvious. There's an access to capital issue, right? A lot of financial institutions in both Africa and the Caribbean try to treat financing SMEs in the same way that they treat financing corporates, and it simply is not going to work, right? Most SMEs cannot give you immovable assets as collateral. Sort of pricing that is associated with SME lending in Africa and Caribbean, a lot of the time is prohibitive. Financial institutions try to sort of, there's a risk premium that is associated with SMEs, which makes credit pricing untouchable for many SMEs. So it either kills their businesses or they don't even bother taking the money in the first place. There's also a clear lack of patient capital. SMEs need that is not too expensive and is patient enough to help them to grow in the medium to long term. And we have not been very good in providing SMEs in Africa and Caribbean with that kind of financing. So these are some of the issues that impede African and Caribbean SMEs from a finance point. There's obviously technical capacity issues as well. This is just, the basic need for SMEs in these regions to, sort of manage a business, the commercial acumen that is required, the ability to leverage technology, the ability to use innovation and digital services. These are things that are missing. Our counterparts, or SMEs counterparts in places like Europe and especially increasingly in Asia, are exposed to these tools, and we simply realize that we have a huge gap in Africa and the Caribbean, and there's a lot of work that needs to be done as far as access to that kind of capacity is concerned. There's a trade information gap. You find, particularly in Africa, but also in the Caribbean, you find that a lot of SMEs don't even know what is on offer in the country next door. So they find themselves trying to source materials from distant countries where what they need to run their business is available next door and possibly at an even cheaper price. So there is a need to create portals or utilities that allow SMEs to find each other, to map out local supply chains and to join those supply chains. There's also an issue, as you can see, with regards to market access. SMEs require linkages to export markets. They need to be helped to trade across borders, whether that's through, sort of digital support, or whether that's actually physically taking them to trade shows and trade fairs and things like that. That kind of support is missing. We're not proactive enough in Africa and the Caribbean in terms of providing these sorts of market access opportunities to SMEs. And finally, there are policy bottlenecks, especially when you consider things like intellectual property and protection of intellectual property. We haven't done that very well, so it's often not as profitable for SMEs in Africa and the Caribbean to produce IP because they cannot monetize. It's not properly protected. There's also often very high compliance costs and high taxes, which do not do anything at all to help African SMEs to grow their businesses and trade across borders. So this is not exhaustive. This is a summary of the gaps that we found when we were sort of conceptualizing our interventions around SME development in Africa and the Caribbean. What I'll be really interested to hear at some point after I finish my presentation is the audience. I would like to hear from the audience if there's anything that we've missed, if there's any gaps that we need to call out, we need to be more aware of as a bank, so that we can develop solutions and make our value proposition to be sharper and more relevant to Caribbean markets. So I'll be quite interested to see if there's any questions or comments around any additional constraints that we should have at the back of our minds as we develop our product offering to the region. Now, the pillars that underpin the program are really just trying to address those barriers I just identified, right? And this is why it becomes critical for us to hear from the SMEs, because our entire offering is built on the back of those assumptions in terms of the gaps that I just spoke about. So if there's others we really need to know so that we bake them into our interventions. But in summary, our Export SME Development Program, is built around 4 key pillars, which are financing, capacity building, market access, and policy advocacy. And the underlying objective really is to ensure that we can ultimately integrate these SMEs in Africa and the Caribbean into export value chain so that they can trade across borders and generate foreign exchange revenues and build their local economies. Now, from a financing standpoint, I will speak a bit more about the products shortly when I get to my next slide. Capacity building really I will also speak about some of the work that we're doing in terms of incubation and acceleration programs, and also workshops for the benefit of SMEs in Africa and Caribbean, which we would obviously extend to the SBA as an outcome of today's session. I'll also speak briefly about market access and the tools that we use to achieve that, and also on some of the work that we're doing around advocacy to essentially make the business environment that Caribbean SMEs are operating in more friendly for their businesses. Before I go a bit deeper into the instruments of intervention, I just want to give a bit of a sense of where our priorities lie in terms of the SME constituencies that we want to support, and the sectors that we think hold the most promise. Now, in terms of SME groups, we're really looking at SMEs who have the propensity to export. That is our core constituency. We are a trade bank. We were instituted to facilitate the development of trade value chains. So we'll be looking at Caribbean SMEs who have exportable products, and who actually have the ambition as well to take those products into other markets. I think that is extremely critical. In doing this role, I have learned that not every SME who has the propensity to export actually wants to. So, we want entrepreneurs, we want business owners whose objective is to trade across borders. Those are the people who really should be sort of benefiting from our intervention. So I think it's an important point that I just wanted to emphasize. From a financing standpoint, I think we would look at businesses with turnover anywhere up to $10 million. We prefer to fund SMEs for new transactions, so not necessarily for the purpose of refinancing existing loans. We want to fund and support new business. Of course, we have stringent KYC and anti-money laundering sort of thresholds that SMEs must scale to be eligible. We just want stable, credible businesses that have a good track record to support. From a sector standpoint, we are almost sector agnostic. So what you can see on the right-hand side of my screen right now is by no means exhaustive. In actual fact, we will support any SME who is doing business that drives or sort of supports our intra-Africa trade and export development objectives as a bank. But of course, what this sector list on the right-hand side of the screen does is it just gives you some sort of sense of where we think there's ample opportunity in the short to medium term. Now, what I want to do here is just, sort of go a bit deeper into the tools that we are using to bring those 4 strategic pillars that I highlighted earlier to life, right? So again, financing, capacity building, market access, policy advocacy. From a financing standpoint, we are able to do credit. Obviously, we're a bank, so that's our bread and butter. So we're able to extend credit both directly and indirectly to qualifying SMEs. Now, one caveat I will put here is the vast majority of our credit-based interventions are through financial intermediaries. And that's for obvious reasons. There's so many SMEs in Africa. It is not practical a lot of the time to be able to deal directly with all of them. So, every now and again, where there is an exceptional case of developmental impact, we may consider a direct transaction with an SME. But generally speaking, what we do is we work with local financial intermediaries and extend credit lines to them, and then they can then on lend to qualifying SMEs in the region. We also are able to do portfolio guarantees, again, intermediated through financial institutions. What that does is it gives those financial institutions the capacity to take more risk and do more business with local SMEs, because we're now, sort of de-risking the transaction for them using our guarantees program. The third one, which I think is quite interesting because Dr. Holder already started to allude to it in her intro, is venture capital. We are very clear that there is a gap, a financing gap in our markets as far as patient capital is concerned. And this is, if we're ever going to pick SMEs up and give them the money that they need to scale and grow into, emerging corporates in the same way that we've seen in Asia and in Europe and in the US and so on and so forth. We have to build a pool of indigenous venture capital. So for that reason, we are actually now in the process of developing a venture fund. We expect it to become fully operational before the end of the year, and it will be situated within the Fund for Export Development in Africa, FEDA, which is Afreximbank's equity investment vehicle. This venture fund, will cater to 3 main buckets. It will cater to SMEs who are in the technologies for tech-enabled venture space. It will cater to the creative economy, and there will also be a general opportunistic pool of funds within the venture fund. So watch this space as far as the venture fund is concerned. I think the final financing sort of instruments that I just want to highlight is trade finance. So we do have sort of traditional trade finance solutions to support SMEs. So things like factoring and forfeiting and supply chain finance. we're also able to bring to bear as part of our offering to SMEs in the Caribbean. Under the capacity building pillar, we do run incubation and acceleration programs with capacity building partners. So essentially what we do is we finance the training of eligible qualifying SMEs. We take them through, sort of 6-month, 9-month, year-long programs that help them to build capacity to export. So this is something that I think we will definitely be extending into the Caribbean going forward now that we've decided to foray as an institution into the region. Essentially what we do is we pick SMEs that we think hold strong promise, and we sponsor their training and give them tools that they need to export as part of these programs. So we've done that for a good few years now. Last year in 2023, I think we trained nearly 1,000 SMEs and got them into export value chains as an outcome of these programs. So pretty impactful stuff, even if we say so ourselves. In addition to these, sort of structured incubation and acceleration programs, we also do workshops and masterclasses, which are usually more sort of day-long events, but also quite impactful. And in these events, we tend to tackle more specific questions. So for example, we may run a program on the impact of artificial intelligence on SMEs, or the impact of the Africa Free Trade Area and what it means for SMEs in that particular geography. The third important tool I'd like to highlight as far as technical assistance, as far as capacity building is concerned, is technical assistance to FIs. Now, you would recall earlier, and I mentioned the fact that we have a challenge with financial institutions not being able to measure SME risk properly, simply because they don't have the skills to do so. So that limits the amount of business that they're going to do with SMEs, and it leads them to price SME risk or put an incorrect premium on SME risks. So the work that we're doing to train local FIs, to become more SME friendly, I think is also quite important. In terms of market access, we've developed what we call the Africa Trade Gateway, the ATG, which is essentially a digital ecosystem, digital architecture that we've developed with a view to mitigating barriers to trade that we know exist, but leveraging technology. So, for example, we have an example of one of the sort of digital assets within this architecture is the Pan-African Payment and Settlement System, which some of you might have heard about PAPS. What that means is what PAPS does is it allows traders to make payments and take payments in their local currency while trading across borders. So if I were to be in Nigeria, for example, wanting to do business with somebody in Barbados, I could make my purchase using the local Nigerian currency, using local naira, and my counterpart in Barbados will get the payment in Bajan dollars. I think that's the right currency. And neither of us would have to do what we do now, which is do the transaction in US dollars. So we would both avoid that transaction through a third currency, and Afreximbank's payment system will deal with that for us. So that's an example of a digital instrument or digital solution within the ATG, which obviously goes a long way in mitigating the issues that SMEs currently face with regards to cross-border trade. Excuse me. There's a few other instruments within the ATG as well. We have a trade information portal. We do have a customer due diligence repository for Mansa, which essentially enables SMEs to conduct KYC before transacting with each other. And there's also a trade regulatory platform as well. But I can take more questions. I can take questions on the ATG. Want me to dig a bit deeper into that further into the session. I'm just conscious of time. I'll talk very quickly about the Intra-Africa Trade Fair, the IATF, which happens every 2 years. It's essentially a convention of SMEs and corporates. And what the IATF does is it gives participating SMEs an opportunity to meet counterparts, traders, sellers, buyers from all parts of the world, so from parts of Africa and the Caribbean. And it helps them to integrate themselves into, these people's supply chains. So, we've had fantastic examples of people who've, come from one country to the IATF and left with buyers from 5 new jurisdictions, which, they would never, ever have been able to reach if they didn't attend the IATF. So I think one of the key things that we can look at as an outcome of today's meeting is, how we involve the SBA and its members in the IATF going forward, because it has proven to be transformational for participating SMEs in the past. Another market access tool that we have is export trading companies. Essentially, what these do is they aggregate SME output in local countries, and what the ETCs do is they aggregate the output and then they export and obviously give the benefits of the yield from that activity back to the local producers. Again, this is something that we're actively doing in Africa, and further down the line, I have no doubt that it's a concept that we will also be looking to introduce in the Caribbean as well. On a final note, I did mention that we use our weight as a broad-based partnership of many African and Caribbean countries to try and drive policy, the kind of policies that will help African SMEs to grow their businesses. This is not exhaustive by any stretch of your imagination, but I can say that there are particular areas that we think that we should be channeling our energy. Intellectual property rights is one. Regulatory and compliance is another area. The need for tax incentives to support SMEs is one, and of course, the need to support youth and women and get them more active in cross-border trade and general economic activity is another. I think this is a good point for me to pause and hopefully make the session a little bit more interactive from this point going forward. But I hope I've been able to just give you a flavor of our Export SME Development Program at Afreximbank, what we think we can do in the Caribbean, and how we hope to achieve it. So I'll pause here and back to you, Dr. Holder.
All right, thank you very much. Ody, we have persons already posting a couple of questions and comments. And so on. I'll ask when we have this session, Ody, that I need you to speak up a little more. I did send you that note, as I have persons indicating the challenge in hearing your presentation. So just speak a little louder for us in the mic. But a few takeaways. We know that Afreximbank is a trade bank, and so you are very much interested in SMEs that have that potential for scale, that potential to export. I'm particularly interested in the capacity building component of the interventions mentioned, the instruments mentioned, because we may have businesses, yes, with a good product, but they may not have the capacity. And so support to help build the capacity to be able to export, is definitely an area that we can consider and that we ought to consider going forward. But you mentioned working primarily with intermediaries here, on the continent and obviously here in the region. I'm just wondering, the kind of intermediaries that you've worked with or that you would consider for the Caribbean. These intermediaries, are they only commercial banks, or is it the intention to consider other MFIs, microfinance institutions?
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me? I'm surprised that there was a sounds like there was an issue with hearing me previously, but is this better?
Well, if you keep it at that level, it should be fine.
Okay. The other people in the room might kick me out, but I will try to project as much as I can. All right. So your question is would we deal with MFIs in addition to commercial banks, correct?
Yes, the kind of intermediaries that you would want to consider for the Caribbean region.
So I think it's a great question. I think for me, the short answer is provided they have the right licensing, we are pragmatic enough to consider them. Of course, we do have a risk management framework, and there are, sort of various indicators that we would look at. But provided they meet all of our risk requirements, we will be happy to consider working with microfinance institutions as well.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you now, Ody, to work with me on the questions because we have quite a few in the chat. The questions are public. I'll maybe refer to the ones that are sent to me directly, but they are public, and if you can draw your attention
I
to them,
cannot
and
see
let's
the
get going.
questions right now, but I'd appreciate if you just read
Yeah,
them
okay.
out, or
All right.
essentially just draw my attention to the ones that you think are most critical.
Okay. So following on from the question on the intermediaries, how then do you approach the capacity building component of the intervention?
Can you come again? How
the capacity building area, you have instruments of intervention here on one of the slides, yeah? And capacity building is an area that I'm very concerned about, and I'm sure many on the call are. And you did identify this as an impediment to growth earlier in the presentation. So we want to really address the issue of capacity building. How can we really build the capacity of our small and medium enterprises in particular to be able to trade, to be able to export their goods and services? So, I'm trying to get a sense of how would the bank go about identifying the partner, and or how do you go about addressing the capacity building intervention in your program?
Okay, no, thank you. I think that's a very good question. So as I said, we run incubation and acceleration programs, right? And the way we deliver these programs is we work with partners who have experience and have pedigree in terms of delivering these sorts of programs. Okay, so what we do is we deliver or we provide, not deliver, we provide a list of criteria that define the eligibility of each of these programs, right? And what these partners do is they go and convene SMEs that fit the criteria that we've defined, right? Those SMEs may be from, depending on the shape of that particular program, they may be from any sector, they may be focused on one sector, they may be from many different countries, or they may be focused on one country, right? So, the programs can vary in that regard, but the principle is always the same. They always have to be export-oriented SMEs. They always have to be SMEs which we expect to be able to export in the short to medium term. And the delivery of the programs is always handled by a strong partner that has a track record that we can trust. So I think going forward, when we launch these programs, we will have to expand. We'll have to get our partners to expand their call for participation to the SBA, so that the pool of SMEs within the SBA falls into the catchment of the capacity building partners. This is something that I'm going to take note of, and I'm going to ensure that any programs that we run going forward are sort of extended to your network and your ecosystem, so that they can put themselves up for selection. Another way that we run these programs is for those financial intermediaries that we extend credit lines to, the sub-borrowers are also sort of invited to participate in specialized or dedicated training programs to build capacity for them, so that the support that they get from us is not just limited to financing. They also get trainings as well. But that sort of training tends to be more sort of workshop based, as opposed to a full-on 3, 6, 9 month acceleration program. So that's in a nutshell is how we operate capacity building activities for the SMEs themselves.
Right. Okay. And a good segue onto that before I move to another topic is a question from Shaudette relative to market access. This capacity building, can this include financing for ISO certifications or consultants who obviously are experts in that in the area, for firms who want to access markets? Would you see that capacity building also covering those areas, ISO certification, understanding, market access, conditionalities, etc.?
The answer is an absolute yes. So you see, these capacity building programs, we have to make sure that they are relevant and fit for purpose, right? So what we do is we co-create the curriculum. We don't impose the curriculum on the partner or the SMEs, right? So we take feedback from forums like this one to try and understand what is required, as far as capacity building is concerned. So it would be silly of us to take a program that is ready-made, which worked in the Gambia, and turn up in the Caribbean and sort of impose it on them. It may not be relevant, it may not be useful. So if the learning gap in the Caribbean is around ISOs, as we said, then of course we would whatever programs that we're delivering, will definitely integrate that and ensure that is covered. That is how we create and deliver value to SMEs through capacity building.
All right, agreed and understood. And you're right. There must be an appreciation for the uniqueness of the various Caribbean economies and the Caribbean reality, so that the capacity building interventions are tailor-made Like for example, I see a question here from Andrew about technology-based businesses. You know, they have an idea, and they're at that ideation stage and may very well be looking for capacity building support to move that technology business to the next level. So quite agree that, you know, the capacity building interventions will have to be tailor-made for each market. A question from Kyle here is the export focus only for trade in Africa, or can this be trade, let's say to the EU, trade to America or North America for that matter?
Cross-border trade. As long as you're trading across borders, I'm more than happy to support. You know, so support is for cross-border trade.
Right. Okay. So that answers that question nicely. So while you close your screen and stop sharing, let's go to a question from Wilson. Is tourism classified as an export product from your perspective?
Yes, tourism is an important sector because people come into your country, earn you foreign exchange. Yeah, it's definitely an opportunity for export on the services side. So you know, we would, if the question really, or if the next question is, would we support SMEs in tourism? I think the answer is yes.
Yeah,
for sure.
And I mean, I could venture a thought to suggest that also includes construction and manufacturing. So it goes beyond tourism. I see a question here from Shelley, and I would suggest, Shelley, that, you know, we're talking about manufacturing as well, construction as well. So any type of business, I'm hearing you, Ody, that you're really, you know, looking at the DNA of the business, and if the business meets, you know, particular criteria.
On tourism, right? To just give you a sense of how important tourism is to us as a bank, right? The bank has actually developed a specialized product, a relay facility called what we call the Construction for Tourism Relay Facility, Contour, right? Essentially, what we're doing with that is we've set money aside to facilitate the emergence of tourism infrastructure like hotels and other tourism service related infrastructure on the continent, and that's, you know, just testament to you know, how important we consider tourism to be for the growth and development of the continent. So, you know, SMEs within that ecosystem, SMEs within those value chains, of course, we would also put both our financial and non-financial support behind as well.
Yeah. Okay. Yes, let's go ahead and close the screen, Ody.
You want me to stop sharing, you said, yeah?
Yeah, stop sharing. And there's a point there about policy. I want to ask about this policy intervention. I mean, you mentioned that the bank is also engaged in assisting with policy interventions to make the SME space, that environment, more enabling to facilitate trade. Yeah. And I took note of Dennis's question here about a particular policy intervention by our government in a prior budget relative to, you know, 100% digital transformation and the tax credit that would be offered and so on. So let's say you would not be aware, yes, of the extent of the policy proposal, but is this something that the bank, for example, would assist with, if it is that in a particular country, you know, the government has particular policy proposals to assist with the development of the SME sector? To what extent would the bank get involved in assisting the various institutions in the operationalization of those policies?
So I think that's a great question. Actually, we have a full-on export advisory service that we provide to governments, right? Export development advisory. And as a matter of fact, this is exactly what they do. They help governments to shape, to refine, to define policies, and also support the implementation of those policies. So, we are definitely, as an institution, able to support Caribbean governments, to shape the policies that they need to implement, to drive the right enabling environment for SMEs, and we'll do it very well. We'll benchmark against other similar countries, both in the Caribbean and in other parts of the world. We'll take lessons learned. We'll show you what best in class looks like, and so on and so forth. So it's definitely a service that the bank can offer to governments that would like us to do that for them.
Yeah. Now you did mention, and my audience heard that there will be the opportunity for your unit to partner with the SBA, especially on the capacity building interventions that you may develop for other parts of Africa, that we can extend those instruments to our SMEs here, so that where applicable, they can participate. But beyond that, I am curious, as is Renee Coppin as well. How do firms that are interested, having heard your presentation, how do they get in contact to be able to advance the conversation, or who do they contact to be able to advance the conversation? Are there intermediaries already established, or are we now in the process of identifying intermediaries that can have those initial discussions on the behalf of interested firms?
So are we talking specifically about capacity building, or?
Well, beyond the capacity building, we've established a model for that, but I'm
Okay.
talking now about the other types of financing,
Right.
Other types of development financing and venture capital. You mentioned venture capital financing earlier, and so on.
Yeah. No, I mean, the starting point is obviously, our rep, our branch office, not even a rep, of our branch office in the Caribbean, which is led by no less than my brother Okechukwu Ihejirika. He's obviously our man on the ground in the Caribbean. So, any propositions, any proposals can always be sent to him. But where there is where there are specific sort of product related issues or questions, then I welcome you. I'll leave my contact information on here. I welcome you to drop me or my colleagues within the SME unit an email, and we'll be more than happy to sort of engage and help to refine or clarify any thinking that you might the SMEs might have on the propositions that they bring forward. So it's first and foremost through the local branch office, which is in Barbados. But again, as I said, more than happy for you to contact us in Cairo directly as well, if need be.
Right. Okay. And Ody, this one is from me now. I tend to be very curious about the level of capitalization of these kinds of projects to make sure that we have adequate capacity to address the needs. So, I'm just wondering if you would share with the audience here the level of capitalization that's been earmarked for the MSME development programs.
What I will say to you and the audience is that we have the full weight of the bank's support behind us. Right? The absolute full weight of the bank's support. I have never, in my time as head of the SME unit, been told that I cannot do a transaction because it's too big. Not once.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So,
well, that's good to know. We know that the bank is well capitalized.
Yeah, as long as eligibility criteria are met, and as long as the transactions have merit, I don't think that capitalization is something that we should be worrying about at this time.
That's always good to hear, because we do have many experience that we can refer to where firms were undercapitalized for one reason or another, and therefore the project was unable to get off the ground, as we say in Beja parlance. So that's very good to know. I know those of you on the call may as well that the Afreximbank its asset base is in the billions. I'm not going to call it the exact amount based on the last report I saw, but we know that it is well capitalized, and therefore the entry into the Caribbean market and the opportunity to help with the development of the MSME sector in the Caribbean market, I think is well positioned and on course for significant impact. So it is really now, how do we bring those interventions to the region in a sustainable manner? How do we identify the projects that the region needs and the MSME sector needs to be developed, and work with the Caribbean office here to get it done? Because for sure, capitalization is not a problem. It's to be able to identify what is often said to be bankable projects, and the right kind of capacity interventions that can take some of our MSMEs to the next level. So we are at our closing time now, Ody. So any final words for us? Any final thoughts that you want to share as we close out our webinar?
Yeah, I'd say capitalization is not a problem. Appetite is also not a problem. We've come into the Caribbean because we're serious about the Caribbean, and we want to make an impact, right? So I think from my standpoint, my message is that we are willing and also able to provide support. So it's really more a case of sort of co-creation going forward. Co-creating solutions, both financial and non-financial, that are digestible to both sides, both to us as a bank and to the SMEs in the region. I think that is the mindset and the approach that we need to take forward. We need to develop solutions that are relevant and would help us to transform the narrative of SMEs in the Caribbean. So it's going to be a joint effort. It's not going to be me sitting in Cairo and trying to shove things down the SMEs in the Caribbean. I think we're open to engage, we're open to co-create, we're open to build together, and I have no doubts that with the right level of commitment, we will transform. We can transform the African space, the Caribbean SME space.
Thank you very much for those final thoughts and for sharing with us today. Colleagues, this has been our webinar. You know that we try to keep you just for an hour, 11 to 12. We are at that time. I see okay, who is the head of the Caribbean office is on the call as well. So I'll ask him if he has any final words he wants to share with the audience. We've had over 80 persons who have joined us today on this webinar. Okay.
Yes, thank you so much. I think mine will be to say a very big thank you to you, Dr. Boda, and your team for putting this together, and to my colleague Ody for facilitating. This is very helpful, and this goes also to confirm our commitment to work with the SMEs. We'll be keen to see how that can work, probably starting with Barbados as our model, and see how we can also now scale this up to other countries within the region. Because as Ody would have mentioned in his presentation, the bank considers the SME sector as critical to the development of countries, the member countries. And we cannot afford to overlook them in coming up with our solution. And so we'll look forward to seeing how we can take this engagement forward in a practical way and in a way that we can also now use as a model for everything that we want to do within the region. So thank you all very much. And we also remain on standby in case of any further questions or engagements to be able to answer.
Okay. Thank you very much, Okay and Ody, for joining us today. Colleagues, we've been hearing from our representatives from the Afreximbank and the desire to assist us here in Barbados and by extension the region in the development of our SME sector through the provision of a number of interventions beyond just traditional financing. We heard a lot about capacity building and incubation and policy interventions and so on. So it goes, beyond the traditional financing that we may have heard about or maybe be accustomed to. So we really look forward to the partnership with the Afreximbank. As we know, they have an office here in Barbados, in Hastings. And as Oki rightly mentioned, they are open to the sector and for any meetings or for any conversations, discussions on projects. And the SBA will definitely be collaborating with the SME unit to make sure we bring to our market here and to the region interventions that will help with the capacity building of our firm. So we want to thank you so much for sharing a part of your day with us. And for those who may have jumped on the call a little late and queried about the presentation, don't worry, all of our sessions are recorded. And following our usual editing process and so on, the sessions will be made available on our website and our YouTube channel, and the presentation by Ody as well will be there that persons can watch at their leisure and pleasure. So if you missed it, fear not, you'll have an opportunity in another day or two to review the session. So thank you so much, colleagues, for sharing. Remember, click on the link in the chat section and just answer a couple of questions for us on today's webinar. Listen out for the next session coming up in August. As I said, this is a monthly exercise for us to make sure that our members are kept abreast relative to what's happening in the SME space. So come August, we'll be back with you for another interesting topic and interesting discussion. Thank you, Oki and Ody, for being with us today, and to all of our members and friends and partners for sharing a part of their Tuesday with us. God bless you all. Bye-bye for now. See you on the next occasion.